What's up, bikers? Episode 145, BlackHeart Bike Company. If you haven't heard of them, you're about to. But before we get into that, thank you all for showing up. I really appreciate everybody that tunes in. You know what? I just realized I forgot to go over to the Apple freaking podcasts and see if anybody commented. So I'm gonna have to do that while we're talking. And because last week I said if somebody wrote a review, I'd shout them out, and I'll make sure I do that. So hold me to it when I'm wrapping up at the end. And if not, well, I don't know what happens. So anyways, those of you guys that have written the reviews in the past, I really appreciate it. It does help a lot. Somehow the podcast gods, they see positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and they're like, hey, we should tell more people about this. So that's always a good thing. So if you have time to go over there and do a 5-star review, do that. That would be awesome. It doesn't cost you anything, but it sure helps us out over here, or me out. And that is what it is. If you want to grab some content for free, just swing by my Instagram, my Facebook, and give it a follow over there at BlackHeart B1. So B1KER B1, and post the normal Facebooky, Instagram kind of stuff, pictures of what I'm doing and whatever, some fun reels and this and that. So that stuff's always fun. If you follow this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, the like button, all the things. Those of you guys that are supporting me on Patreon, thank you very much. You guys are, like, honestly the main support stream, the only support stream for this thing. So you are my sponsors. So I really appreciate all my sponsors out there. You guys are awesome. Really, if you want to come help out, little as $1, you could throw down $5, put some beer in the fridge, keep the camera gear new, all the things. So I really appreciate everybody over there. There's some extra content. And whenever I get a chance to, like, work out an extra discount or something like that with somebody that I've had on the show, I put those up there. So they're just for people on Patreon. So you can swing over there and check that out, patreon.com, or I'm sure there's a link in the show more or in the podcast notes, wherever you want to do it, you can do it. And like I said, thank you to everybody over there. Really, really, truly means a lot. I'm going to bring Zach online here. What's up, Zach?
What's up, Robert? How are you?
Man, I'm living the dream, right? I got a buddy that always says nightmares are dreams too, dude.
Fair. That's a fair point. I never thought about it that way.
I always think, because I said that's like one of those things that I always say, living the dream, and I say it at work a lot, and it always is like humorous to me, like who laughs at it because they think I'm being sarcastic, and who responds and is like, right on, man, that's awesome. Like, it's interesting. It gives me like a little like introspect to who the person is, like right out the gate. So
Hey, I mean, I'm just proud that, there are people out there that know what their dream is, right? There's so many of us who, through life, the dream changes, or, people that are kind of lost or fluttering or still finding their dream. If you can, 1, identify it, and then 2, actually live it, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Do you have kids?
Got a dog.
There you go.
A dog and me. Taking care of me and my dog is enough.
That's a good place to start. Yeah. So when my kids were little, the thing that I used to always tell them is, like, I don't care what you grow up to be. Like, if you are rich or not rich, like, all I want you to do is go for whatever it is that, like, you're really the most stoked about. And if you do that, you'll be successful. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's an experiment. We'll see. We'll see if I told him the right thing. They didn't know it at the time. So anyways, here we are, talk about bikes. I'm making a New Year's resolution to make sure that at the beginning of these shows that I actually, like, get people the basic information of who it is that I'm talking to, because it's so easy to just get on and start, like, yapping, and then like 20 minutes later I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't even tell it. Like, so if you could give me like the elevator pitch, what's BlackHeart Bike?
Me or BlackHeart Bike? There's
either way, man, however you want to start.
So BlackHeart is started as a passion project, and I think that's how a lot of companies start, right? I had a career in advertising that was about 16 years deep, And I'd worked for big companies, I'd worked for small companies, and just realized that regardless of the setting, you don't have a lot of control, because if you're at a big company, you're a small fish in a big pond, and it's a lot of layers at the top. At a small company, the owners are holding on real tight, because every decision hits the bottom line in their pocket and the potential success of the company. And so in 2017, I was, one, getting tired of working for other people, and two, looking for a new bike. And the bikes that I wanted, I couldn't afford. It was a beautiful, at least in my opinion, titanium kind of all-road gravel bike. One bike that I could ride as a road bike and a gravel bike. And I couldn't find the right combination of, brand, price, functionality, aesthetic, all those things combined. And so I kind of wiggled my way into a factory that I was pretty lucky to stumble upon in Taiwan. And this was pre-pandemic. So I was able to get them to make me a sample, and got the bike. It wasn't right. The geometry was wrong. The aesthetic was wrong. But that's something that you learn when you're working with a group of people who are highly talented, but they are 6,000 miles away across an ocean. You have to go through that learning process of how do you communicate effectively to get the product that you want. So I just started kind of like exploring a little more and doing rounds of prototyping and giving frames to a few friends for them to test. And in 2018, I left my job in advertising, and I started working carpentry, which is what I did growing up. I was working carpentry during the days, like everything from, just simple, build a deck, or like tear out a bathroom and redo it. And just kind of over the course of about 2 years had worked up to kind of overseeing larger projects, all the while building BlackHeart on nights and weekends. So this was still the prototyping and testing phase and exploration of what's the brand name and what do we stand for and what do we want to do. So January 1st, 2020 is when I launched. And
it was like a perfect time to launch a bike company.
Perfect time. Yeah. And it was an interesting time too, right? Because it definitely, like, the bike boom didn't hurt.
Right. But I'm sure those first 3 months you were like, what the F am I doing right now?
Not really, because I self-funded the company with the savings that I had from working.
Right.
And so I didn't have any pressure from people, any promises that I had made.
Right.
Essentially, the promise that I made to myself was that I was 38 at the time. I'll go and, like, here's the amount of money I'm going to put in, and here's the amount of time that I'm going to put towards it. And if I get to that time limit and I haven't sold any bikes, or it's not working, okay, so let's say I'm 41, right?
Right.
And it's not working, I can still get a job. I still have time to make that money back. It's not the end of the world. And so, I'd rather do it, and at least I'll learn something along the way. So yeah, that first year, the reason why I say I don't think it really helped was because, no one really knew who I was at the time. I did a first run of frames. I did 30 frames for the first run, and I had 5 of those I made up into test bikes. I gave a couple to ambassadors, so let's say I had 20 to sell. Whether there's a bike boom or not a bike boom, if you're going to buy that particular bike, it's a pretty particular person, and finding 20 customers in any economy, most likely you can kind of do that. So it's the reason, like the reason for the name BlackHeart was, not only could I not find the bike that I wanted, but I mentioned that I couldn't really find a brand that I related to that had that bike. And what I was hearing from a lot of bike brands in 2017, 2018 was, I think it's still happening today, was, here's the new bike year after year, and this one is 3 watts faster and 100 grams lighter and 13% stiffer at the bottom bracket. And like I grew up as competing in other sports, never in cycling. So none of that really mattered to me. And like, yes, it's fun to get techie, and yes, it's like gear is fun, and yes, it's fun to go fast. But for me personally, it just didn't matter.
Hmm.
And I kind of was turned off by it. And so I wanted a brand that was not necessarily counterculture, which, that can mean a lot of different things, but was just really focusing more on a beautiful product that was quality, that, focused on kind of the average cycling enthusiast who doesn't care about 10 grams off of your bike, and
Yeah.
can just go out there and ride.
Right. So when you got that first one, like what kind of things was wrong with it? You said the geometry was off. Was it like by like a little bit, or was it like, man, this thing is just not what I was envisioning at all?
No, so essentially, so I have from carpentry, I would say that I'm kind of a maker. I can make anything out of wood. If something's
Hmm.
broken, I try and fix it. Like the place that we moved into now that is in Truckee, California, where I now moved the bike company out of LA. I still have the bike shop in LA, but then BlackHeart's here. When we moved in this house, there's an old snowblower that wouldn't
Hmm.
start. And it's like, you know, who the heck knows how to fix a Craftsman snowblower from 1980?
Right.
So just through, and I didn't know how to like work on small engines, but I just kind of went through and like, okay, not starting, spark plug, carburetor, find a carburetor, like, oh, it's not work, it's not throwing snow, belts, and just kind of like
Yeah.
diagnosing and fixing. And so I had that mindset of kind of industrial design,
Hmm.
tinker and a fixer. And so learning bike geometry came natural to me. There's a
Hmm.
guy named Russ Denny who used to live in California and used to make custom bikes, and he now lives in Texas, or at least the last time I checked. So I'd reach out to Russ and introduce myself and ask for his help as kind of a consultant on geometry.
Hmm.
Um, but that first prototype that you're asking about, I had gone in 2013. I was riding a CAD 10
Hmm.
Cannondale road bike, and I started riding all the gravel road or the fire roads in LA.
Hmm.
Not ideal, 25 mil tires. So then it's like,
Yeah.
cool, like, okay, I want to ride more off-road. I got a Niner RLT9, the
Hmm.
aluminum one. Great off-road. On-road, it's such a robust aluminum frame. It didn't really have that kind of peppy and snappiness
Hmm.
on-road. And then I got into a couple different specialized cruxes, same thing, robust, staunch carbon frame that's durable. So on-road, it just doesn't really have any sort of life to it. Great bikes in their own right, but just not great on road.
Hmm.
So I kind of used a evolution of essentially like a gravel bike or a cyclocross bike geometry, and the
Hmm.
result was what you would expect: great off road, but on road just kind of handled kind of funky. And I
Hmm.
grew up ski racing downhill on the East Coast, and so descending all the kind of canyons in LA, I'm super comfortable on, and I
What
can
was
really
it that you said you were racing? I'm sorry, it like cut
oh,
out just for
downhill ski racing.
okay,
So
ski. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought you
yeah,
said, but I wanted to make sure, and that way for anybody that's listening, they might have been scratching their head too. So, okay, I got
no,
you.
all good. So like descending, I'm very comfortable on a bike, and
Right.
I have like a good intuition for race line, and so if a bike is not kind of clipping the apex and feeling like an extension of my body, I can call that out super easy. And so that was one of the
Hmm.
issues with the first sample, is just the downhill characteristics just felt really funky. It was kind of like pretty vague and kind of washing a little wide. So
Yeah.
problem number one, and then problem number two was you get a 2D drawing and now some 3D models from factories, but at the time it was just a 2D drawing, and so I had a very basic understanding of how to take a 2D sketch, essentially like a blueprint, and then
Hmm.
understand what that's going to look like in real life.
Right.
So through that sampling process, you start to pick out like, oh, the gap between the where the top tube is welded to the head tube and the top of the head tube and the seat tube and the top of the top tube, and like all the
Yeah.
little kind of things that an industrial designer would really pick out on, who wants
Yeah.
something to be beautiful. I just didn't understand that for that first prototype. So that was quickly fixed over time. And then, each round that I do, it's refined to make things maybe a little more simple or a little more functional. But
I mean, that stuff happens. I have a 3D printer that I print a bunch. I think we were talking about it whenever we chatted before the show.
Yep.
And
yeah, did you find that screw?
I did.
Okay.
It was driving me crazy. For those of you guys that like, we were supposed to talk beforehand, and whenever our call was, it was like I lost this screw to my 3D printer like 10 seconds before, and it was just driving me bonkers. So anyways, but like when I first started printing things, like my idea of how far something was away from something, I didn't really have a grasp for it, so it'd be like now after a while, it's like, oh, I want that 10 millimeters off of this, and I want this, 15 millimeters off of that, because I'm making small stuff, so it's like it makes way more sense to me now. So I can understand where you're coming from, where like if you don't have like I wouldn't think about how much my head tube sticks out above my top tube. I would just be like, this looks good, half inch, sure. Like
yeah.
right.
Yeah, and that's everybody, right? Like some people, that stuff you would just see it and you'd automatically see it and point it out and be like, oh, that's all symmetrical, I love it. And other people just would never kind of calculate in their brain. And yeah, that's all good either way. But for me, it's those small details and the tube kind of diameters and the ovalizations, all of that plays into really creating a product that I think is one of the better bikes out looking out there.
So you threw around the word all road, and I like it. I made a joke with the guy I was on last week with. I think he had demoed one of your bikes.
Oh, no way.
And I'm drawing a blank on the name of his channel right now, but anyways, he's down in Southern California. But I was saying that's like the down country, like marketing term of the road world, right? So like road world, like they started saying down country, and everybody's like, what the fuck is this? And so now we have all road. So can you tell me like what all road is? That way like people understand, because
the simple term is to call it a gravel bike. That's the easiest way to understand it. I think the issue with that for me is that where I saw the market going and what companies were doing back in 2017, 18, 19 was, like I said, let's make road bikes more aerodynamic, lighter, stiffer, and, more and more for professional racers. And then as gravel bikes came on the scene, at first it was essentially, a slacker road bike with big tires. And then it became suspension forks, dropper seat posts, rear suspension this, saddle or seat suspension that. And they became kind of mini mountain bikes.
Yeah.
And I was kind of in the middle trying to understand where I fit. So the easiest way to understand the BlackHeart is it's as close as you can get to a road bike geometry with gravel tire clearance, which means when you put a road wheel on it, not only does it handle like a road bike, I'd say it's between kind of a race bike and an endurance bike. So it's super intuitive and quick and snappy. The aesthetics of it, when you put that road wheel on it, the fork is shaped in a way that the smaller, thinner road tire doesn't get lost. And the same for the chain stays and the seat stays. So with road wheels on it, it really blends in like a road bike. But when you put a gravel tire on there up to a 700 by 40, it's super capable off-road, really stable. It kind of has like road bike handling off-road. So it's not the bike that you just point straight over super rough terrain and just like, lean back. You're kind of more picking your line and skidding and playing around with the terrain, which is how I like to ride anyways. So that's why I kind of put a stake in the ground and called it all road, because I think it's not a road bike. I think calling it a gravel bike is a disservice because of its road ability. So yeah, all road. Right in the middle.
Isn't there like, and I'm not like super like up to date with all the terminology, but isn't like CX like it's not quite as like slack as gravel, and then gravel is like a little bit more like trail oriented or something like that. So is that accurate, or are they like interchangeable?
The way that I would look at it is that, and I never rode cyclocross, and I don't know the geometry on those bikes super well.
Mm-hmm.
But typically a steeper head tube because you've got those quick U-turns and you know, you have to be really sharp picking your lines. So
Mm-hmm.
that is great on cyclocross courses, but to your point, a gravel bike's gonna have a slacker head angle
Mm-hmm.
because with a steeper head tube, it's gonna kind of like toss you around a little bit if you're riding fast through rough terrain.
Yeah,
Uh,
and try to push you forward more, like you could get hung up more and like
Yeah, and where I don't know is when once you start getting into like bottom bracket heights,
yeah.
cyclocross, gravel, road, like typically the lower the bottom bracket, the more kind of stable the bike is, kind of leaning side to side on turns. But
Mm-hmm.
then you get into pedal strikes on rough terrain, or like if in cyclocross, if you're kind of popping up and over barriers, you could hit your bottom bracket easier. So
Mm-hmm.
a cyclocross bike, I would say, is super appropriate for cyclocross racing. If
Mm-hmm.
you are a person looking to just have one bike to do road or gravel or just ride gravel, I would say gravel bike is better than a cyclocross bike just because it's that cyclocross bike. It's like a triathlon bike, right? Like
It's like really specific for
that's
its purpose.
specific for triathlon, and you're not going to
Ah,
really enjoy riding it any other way.
right on. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was just like the way that the industry kind of like took off and like originally they were calling it CX and then later people started calling it gravel or something like that. So
Yeah.
it was kind of one of those things where it was like seemed like a little bit of a gray area to me. So, but that makes sense what you're saying. So
And
where would you like? So you would fall like so in your mind, it like cyclocross really isn't in the mix of where your bike is. Your bike is like between road and gravel, and don't think about cyclocross because that's like a whole different game.
Well, I wouldn't categorize it as a cyclocross bike, but I
Yeah.
do have customers who race cyclocross with my bike, and they're happy with it. I
Okay.
don't have any personal experience with that,
Yeah.
but essentially, like I have a few different types of customers. I have a customer who has their aero carbon lightweight road bike because they like to go out and smash group rides and go for PRs up mountains. And
Mm-hmm.
then they buy a BlackHeart as their gravel bike because they like a racy road handling gravel bike.
Mm-hmm.
I've got people like me who will have the BlackHeart and then they'll have two sets of wheels, road wheel, gravel set, and just swap them back and forth depending on where they're riding and what they're doing. And then I have people who um, only ride it as a road bike. It's kind of like the all road aluminum version. They'll buy that as their first road bike because it's very similar geometry to an endurance road bike, and they can go out. It's a little more comfortable for them than like getting a race specific road bike, and then it's kind of future proof if they decide to get into gravel.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely I think I fall into the same category as you where at least that's what I've done with my current gravel bike is like switch between road and gravel and that was one of the things that like really drew me to actually reaching out to you in the first place was I mean, long story short, I didn't want to be a road biker. So I was like, I can deal with this gravel bike thing and that'll help me burn some calories and spend some time with the lady. But it seemed like more often than not, I was riding more road with it, but I still didn't want to like just be like, all right, I'm buying a road bike because I like that ability to go like, hey, there's this fire road over here. Like, where does that go? I can do
Yeah.
that, and so that's like I really like the idea of having something that's like a little bit more geared to the road rider, but still gives you that versatility because that's really what I was after was like I don't want because I don't want to be a full-on road biker. Like I don't really care about the grams. I don't really care about,
Yeah.
it does my tire roll slower with a gravel wheel compared to a 25 millimeter tire. Yeah. But does it really matter? I memean, look at me. I'm not aero, like, yeah. So it seems like it seems like a really like, a good place to be. At least it's very appealing to me. So your aluminum version is basically just the same frame in aluminum.
Same exact design, aesthetic, tube shapes. Um, when I started BlackHeart, it was really product focused. It was
Mm-hmm.
a product that I wanted. and the need that I saw was that product.
Mm-hmm.
The like BlackHeart as a company has evolved over the last couple of years from a product company more into a purpose company, meaning that one of the other things that I think is lacking, and I think a lot of people think this way, and it's been kind of brought out in the last couple of years, is that cycling has not been the most diverse sport. And that's not because women or people of color or minority populations don't like to ride bikes. It's for a multitude of reasons. One of which is that it hasn't just, just hasn't been that welcoming. Even when I started riding road bikes in 2008, when I moved to LA, I like found a local group ride online and showed up and did not feel like I belonged, right? I didn't have the right sock height, or like didn't have my glasses on, or whatever it was, right? And so it's a super intimidating sport. And then you compound that, so that's like inclusivity, and then you compound that with accessibility, so like a price point thing. I would consider those two things separate, just for argument's sake, or the way that I look at them. And so from an inclusivity standpoint, the way that I work to try and help with that is by supporting people that are already kind of doing the work, right? Like a company could go and create the X Company Institute of Cycling Inclusivity program and probably make a difference. But from my standpoint, I don't have the bandwidth nor the money to do that. But there are some great people and communities already kind of doing that work. They're going out there leading rides. They're making content that shows people like them riding. And so I choose to support those people and help to amplify their voices. Yeah. And then from an accessibility standpoint, which is where the aluminum bike comes into play, I fully recognize, a titanium $5,000 to $7,000 bike is not something that is attainable for most people. Me included, except for the last few parts of my previous career. So the aluminum bike is kind of designed to try and make that the same experience a little more accessible. It's still expensive. It's, starts at $3,000 and goes to around $5,000, but essentially it's half the price of the all-road bike. So for someone who really likes what we're doing and wants that bike, it definitely is a little more approachable than the titanium bike. And for people who still, that's still expensive, there are a ton of bikes out there that are, $1,500, $1,000 to $2,000 that they can get. So that market, I feel like, is kind of covered. And there's no way, just from like a volume standpoint, I could compete with like a giant bikes, right? They're always going to be able to make that $1,500 bike for people. And that's awesome. And I'll kind of push people that way.
Is your aluminum one, is it brushed as well? So it's like, or is it painted?
Nope, it's painted. So the titanium one is essentially a value price within the titanium market and a competitive price within the carbon market. So, the titanium all-road with the force access build is going to be, potentially half the price of some titanium bikes out there. It will be the same price as a competitor carbon bike, or potentially a little cheaper depending on the manufacturer. And that's kind of like a high-end carbon. I look at carbon as two things. There's like high-end carbon and low-end carbon. Low-end carbon, just make a carbon frame so that we can say it's carbon as cheaply as possible, and it costs $100 to make it at a X factory. And then there's high-end carbon, which is, has $1 million worth of R&D into it. And that's why they can justify the price for it, even though maybe the manufacturing cost is $300 a frame.
Yeah.
So titanium is kind of value product. And then the aluminum one, I would say, is more of a premium product within the aluminum category. Aluminum bikes get a really bad rap because they're typically kind of pretty rigid and thick and stiff. And they're built that way, again, because it's cheaper to make them that way. High-end aluminum, which is what I do, it's the material, but also the tubing. So it's double-butted tubing, meaning it's thinner in the middle of the tube and thicker where the welds are. It has curved seat stays. So like I've experienced this. Cody, who works for BlackHeart and then also one of my partners at our bike shop in Venice Beach, Luft, I just swapped his titanium bike to an aluminum bike. he can't tell the difference in the ride quality. I couldn't
Oh,
tell the
wow.
difference. So the aluminum bike is worth every penny of the price in comparison to any other aluminum bike. It'll ride, amazingly well.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you compare that to a low-end carbon frame, which is maybe the same price, the low-end carbon frame is going to ride kind of like a piece of wood, because again, they're making it kind of like thick and chunky,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of R&D into it to give it certain ride qualities. So the BlackHeart aluminum frame versus a low-end carbon frame, same price, the BlackHeart aluminum is going to ride way better.
Mm-hmm. Right on. You mentioned the tube like diameters and shapes like that, how that changes the ride. Could you talk about that?
I'll talk about it as far as I like within my knowledge base, because
Yeah, no, that's good. That's probably about as good as I want anyway.
yes. So one of the ways that I create a product that has kind of a price point that is, I would say, a good value, is by relying on the expertise of my manufacturer, and by not going and creating a proprietary, suspension seat, whatever system, or, whatever technology that I'm going to put on the bike. It's about using kind of try and true methods in a unique way to create a beautiful product that rides well. So when it comes to material, carbon, titanium, aluminum, and steel, and I think this is maybe where you're getting at, is you can make a great bike out of any of the materials, or you can make a terrible bike out of any of the materials.
Mm-hmm.
Each material has an inherent property. So carbon fiber, lightweight, and you can shape it into pretty much any shape that you want, aerodynamics, or you can shape it in a way that kind of gives some flex to it. And then also the layups and the resins and all that. You can kind of, sky's the limit with carbon.
Yeah, you can also like make shapes that like wouldn't make sense to like get any other way, like, so it's like if I want a triangle top tube, you can do that, Yeah.
Titanium as a material is same strength as steel, but half the weight. It doesn't have a fatigue life. So if you take a titanium rod and bend it back and forth a billion times, it will still have that same strength to it. And it has the frequency at which the material vibrates is such that it kind of cancels out any road vibration. So that's why you hear like titanium is a magic carpet ride. And that's like part of that is marketing BS, and part of that's real.
Yeah.
Aluminum, lightweight, strong, stiff, not as strong as titanium or aluminum or steel. So that's why you see the bigger tube shapes typically with aluminum, because a bigger tube shape allows you to have better strength.
Mm-hmm.
Aluminum does have a fatigue life. If you wiggle an aluminum tube back and forth, 10,000 times, it'll start making little cracks, and it'll snap.
Right.
And then steel, it can be really beautiful. Old steel frames, everyone talks about how they would ride, but it's heavier and it corrodes. Whereas like aluminum corrodes a little bit, titanium doesn't corrode. Tubing, if you have a straight gauge tube that's the same thickness the entire length, versus what's called a double butted tube, where it's thicker on the ends where you're going to weld it, but then thinner in the middle, that reduces weight, and it also gives a little bit of spring to the tube. It gives it a little bit of more flex. And so that's why you'll see, if you kind of look at titanium bikes out there or aluminum bikes, the cheapest ones that you find, you're like, oh, this is a great price. It's a titanium frame. It'll just be straight gauge tubing. It won't be double butted.
Oh, that makes sense.
So then that's where you say you go from like, your cheapest titanium frame out there for $1,500 or something, or $1,000 without a fork or anything else. When you kind of go to the higher end frame, like a BlackHeart or most of the US made ones, it'll be double butted tubing. And so what we did was we took that approach and applied it with aluminum. So it's double butted tubing. The seat stays are a little bent. And so even though aluminum is known for being stiffer, the aluminum frame, or our aluminum frame, does have a little bit of flex to it, and has like a softer ride quality, even though it still is staunch enough to like get out of the saddle and put some power down without it being a noodle.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, because I was wondering, you were saying it was like the same tube sizes or whatever in the
Same
two different
diameters, yeah.
forms. So the inside is where it could be thicker. Then is basically is how you're like
The
making
cross
that.
section of it, yeah, right. And
Yeah.
that's where I rely on my manufacturer, and I say, this is what I want. You know, if you take a aluminum gravel bike that's only made for gravel, it's gonna have really thick tubes, like aluminum mountain bike, right? Aluminum mountain bike, if you flick the tube, it just goes tink.
Yeah, it's kind of thud. Yeah,
Right, because you're gonna crash and you're gonna hit a rock and you don't want to dent your frame.
right.
If you take a gravel bike that's made that way and you put road wheels on it, it's gonna ride like a piece of wood. It's gonna have no feel to it, and it's just gonna be kind of this thick, ride that has no life to it.
Yeah.
If you put the top tube of an aluminum BlackHeart, it pings. It pings just like the titanium. Now, the trade-off there is that if you do crash and you run into a wall, a concrete wall, and hit your top tube, you're going to dent the top tube. You're going to dent the top tube of a titanium bike as well. But that's the trade-off. And it's the same thing with any material. Carbon, you can make a robust carbon mountain bike that you can huck off a 20-foot drop. If you were to use that construction method for a road bike, it would ride like a piece of wood. That's why with the high-end road bikes out there, it's thin carbon tubing, and that's why you see if you crash and your handlebars swing around, you crack your top tube. People will tip over and just like hit a little rock and their chainstay breaks, and that's something that I didn't like that experience. So that's why I prefer titanium and aluminum, because it is more robust, given the same ride characteristics than carbon fiber.
Yeah, that would be a real bummer. And it's not like that's a manufacturing defect, so it's not like you can go and warranty it. But I'm sure from the consumer's standpoint, they're like, dude, I just dropped it and it broke. This has got to be manufacturing. And it's like, well, that's kind of what you paid for,
It's just the trade-off. It's like, I mean, it's not rocket science, right? If you make something lighter, it's not going to be as strong.
Right. Yeah, at least, that's the way it goes for now, right? That's interesting. It's definitely it's not really something that I've put a lot of thought into, but it definitely makes a lot of sense. And when you say it and kind of spell it out, it's like, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So had you ridden had much experience on a titanium bike before you decided you wanted to build one, or you were just like,
no, pure
I feel
lust.
like this is the direction I want to go?
Yeah, pure lust and experimentation. And like I said, I was pretty lucky. I found out who makes titanium frames for a large competitor. Because very few bike companies own their own factories, right? It's all third-party factories. And so through this like random nerdy internet forum, I found out who their factory was. And I reached out to them and said, hi, this is who I am. This is what I'm looking to do. I'm interested to make a sample. And it turns out it's basically the premier Taiwanese titanium factory.
Right on.
And so I kind of
your Google skills are good then, huh?
Yeah, I stumbled into them, and it was kind of fortuitous. And so, but then now I have a Taiwanese national who lives over there, and he's my quality control expert. So anytime the first production I flew over to Taiwan, number one, I wanted to go, and number two, I like meeting people in person. So I flew over. Met my QC guy in person, went to the factory, QC'd everything myself, and we kind of went through what's important to me. And then I also kind of rented a car and drove around Taiwan and checked it out. So it was an awesome trip.
How was that?
Oh, dude, it's super sick. Taiwan is interesting. There are parts that I love, and there are parts that I wouldn't go back for. So Taipei, the kind of main big city, it's super interesting. Like, I don't know what I expected, but it felt like a city from the 80s. It just felt very analog, which I don't think most people would expect. And maybe in my head, I was thinking Tokyo, which I haven't been to either. But it just it had this really kind of nice, kind of humble feeling to it. And I rented a city bike, which are about 70% of the size of US city bikes, and I'm 6'2". And so the couple days that I was in Taipei, I was riding around on this like miniature bike, just kind of checking out the city, which was super fun. Then drove to my factory, did QC, check that out. But then in the middle of Taiwan is a huge mountain range. It goes up to 10,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are a bunch of roads that go up from either side. So I rode a bunch of those, beautiful kind of rainforest, national forest style,
Wow.
really small kind of 1 to 2 lane roads from time to time. So it was kind of I guess it would be the west side of Taiwan, drove all the way down to the southern tip, which is, I'm going to forget the name of it now. But kind of a more modern city, which was really cool to check out.
Yeah.
Got down to the southern tip and went around to the East Coast. And just like my mind started getting blown, number one, because it's this crazy long highway where the mountain range terminates right at the ocean and nobody's really over there. So for, I don't know if it was like 100 miles, you're just kind of driving in this beautiful kind of, felt like Jurassic Park. But the whole coast was just these one after the other beautiful point breaks with waves just curling and nobody in the water. So I didn't know if there were sharks or what was going on, but that was really interesting. And then kept driving up the East Coast. And that's where the Taiwan KOM is. There's a race every year, which goes from the ocean to the top of the 10,000 foot climb. And I went out and I went to ride it. And I got like maybe 60% of the way up. And I turned around and there was a typhoon coming in.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like riding up this long climb and it's not like undulating. It's just straight up for 10,000 feet. And along the way, there's like weird construction. There's this one farmer who was up on this hillside and I kept hearing all these explosions. And I thought that it was construction. And then I realized there's this guy up on this bluff above where I was riding who we're the same age. You remember M80s and cherry bombs?
Yeah.
So he had which are very large firecrackers for anyone who was born after, I don't know, 1990.
Yeah.
He was basically on this hillside where he lives, lighting cherry bombs and throwing them above my head, blowing up in the air. And so I just kind of like wave at him and like I kind of figured there's nothing I can do. So then I keep going and the guy gets on a moped and comes up and chases me and starts coming up and trying to talk to me. And, I don't speak Chinese. So I'm like trying to kind of like talk to him or whatever. And he's offering me food, which I was like, no, good. And, no judgment. The guy had like no teeth. It's like just a crazy experience. So I like keep going, get past the halfway point to about 6,000 feet. And I'm pretty smoked. And I turn around and just see the storm coming in. So I turn around, ride down, and about halfway down, it just is like nuking rain. Just the biggest raindrops I've ever seen in my life. There's a video of it that I have. It's maybe still on Instagram, but just like I've never been so wet in my life. Get back down to my car, and it kind of stopped raining at that point. And it's so hot there that it like you dry kind of instantly. So it was like I'd never seen it rain so hard, even in the cities going around. But like people, that's just how you live, right? Like you had an umbrella, but you were walking around with flip flops, just getting wet. You see people riding by on bikes, kind of commuting from work they're soaking wet. It just kind of is what it is over there.
Yeah. Right on. That's interesting. It definitely sounds like a good time. It's funny you mentioned the thing about the rain. Are you from California? Been out here all your life, or
New Hampshire?
Okay, so you're from back
coast.
Yeah.
But I know
I'm from Pennsylvania originally, and I always tell people out here in California, they're like, "Man, it's pouring," and I'm like, "It drizzles in California. It doesn't rain here."
Not this year.
Maybe once a year you'll be like, "Oh my God, it's actually raining." Like, because in Pennsylvania, that's how it comes down always. It's like buckets, and so yeah, it's funny. It reminded me when you were telling the story of the Forrest Gump, where he's like, "It rained from every direction, even rain from the bottom."
That's what it's like. That's what it's like.
So, like, what are some of the things that you've kind of learned, like the big lessons that you've learned over the last few years of working with the company overseas?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit. So lessons that I've learned working with companies overseas.
Yeah.
Um, so I think like communication is super challenging, especially when you don't speak their native language. So having someone who is a translator, someone who can go on site to the factory and check in, because like, you think you're clear,
Yeah.
and it's not their fault. It's just we all have our own communication styles and our own biases. So I
Yeah.
could tell you how to do something, and you wouldn't do it the same way I would do it, just because my communication and your communication
Yeah.
style is different. You add in the fact that you're on a opposite time schedule, and you don't speak the same language. Um, yeah, it can be super challenging. So the sampling process is super important. Um, being very clear and basically having a Bible for your design so that they can always reference it is really
Yeah.
important. Um, I think learning as much as you can about cultural differences and how to kind of interact and how to ask for things. The importance of learning. Even like I'll send them Chinese New Year's gifts,
Yeah.
and like do a handwritten card or something, because
Yeah.
in different cultures that means a lot to people. So yeah, communication, learning their culture, and then you will not find, except for rare instances like I had, the factories that you find using Google are not the ones you want to work with. If you search e-bike batteries, because you're going to start a company and you need some sort of battery, if you just Google it, those aren't the companies you want to work with. You want to work with the companies that don't advertise. And so it takes time to build those relationships, to get in with different companies. Luckily, we don't have to go there anymore necessarily, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever ridden or read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
No, I haven't, but I've heard that mentioned before on this podcast. It's one of those ones that I want to like get in audio form just so I can listen to while I'm riding or something.
You should. I mean, when he started, it's like, I need a shoe factory. Well, I need to fly to Asia, and I need to start driving around and asking where there are shoe factories, and maybe I'll go to a shoe store and ask them where they buy their shoes, and then talk to that person. And it's like, I don't think people really have an excuse anymore for, if you want to do something, I mean, you can do it, whether it's fix a 1980s Craftsman snowblower by watching YouTube. When we were growing up, if you wanted to, I was trying to think what the example was the other day. I wanted to learn about car suspension for my Golf when I was in college. Like, I had to go to the shop and ask them about the products, and then they had a brochure. You couldn't just Google what's the best car suspension out there, and you'd see a YouTube video with someone who's already reviewed all 10.
Yeah.
There is no excuse for not being able to learn about something, not being able to find someone to talk to. So yeah,
the access to information is just like, it's just amazing. And I think that it's like there's some things that I say sometimes, I'm like, man, you're really dating yourself. But it's like, I feel like kids nowadays, they don't have a clue on like how fortunate they are to have that kind of information. I mean, for God's sakes, I can't tell you how many stone conversations I had in high school where we were sitting around trying to figure out some word for friggin' 35 minutes, right? Like nowadays it's like, what's that word that starts with J and sounds like helicopter? And it's like, poof, here it is,
Yeah.
But outside of that, but yeah, like the access as far as like, I have this model water heater and the elements out, and there's some dude on YouTube that's like showing you screw by screw. Here you go. So yeah, there's definitely that's amazing. It's amazing to have that. But going back to like your communication with the companies overseas, I can completely relate. I've had a few things made in China for like merch, and really small things where in our culture is kind of like, yeah, go ahead and do what you think is right. And it's like, they're not going to give you any feedback. They're not going to be like,
No.
So is this what you're thinking? Or you like, it's like, okay. And then you get something, you're like, oh, I need to actually like be 100%. This is what I want, you know?
Yes. And like, there is a level of like, I default to politeness in those situations in a business setting.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be seen as the guy who has to have everything perfect. And, you know, it's like being so specific about the smallest details. But what I've learned is if I don't do that, they will do something that I wouldn't do. And it's not because it's cheaper or easier or faster. It's simply because that is their opinion on what's the right way to do it, or the best way to do it. And so, you know, with my product, every single little detail. I don't know if do you know the company Singer? They make like retro mod 911s that cost $500,000.
Oh wow! When you said Singer, I was thinking about like a freaking
Sewing machine. Yeah. Well, sewing machines are great too, but so it's this guy who loves 911s and loves, you know, manual shift and the beauty of the older 911s. And so he took a newer car, stripped it down to the frame, and then basically every part that goes onto the car, from the, you know, the little knob to roll down the windows to the engine, is bespoke for this new version of the 911 that he made. If you saw one driving down the street, you probably wouldn't stand out. But then when you look at it, it's like an F1 car, that from a quality perspective. But in their factory, I think it was him, got up with a can of spray paint and spray painted "Everything is important." And now in their new factory, it's like a designed element on the wall. And that's their philosophy. It's, you know, the mirror has to be exactly perfect.
Yeah.
And if it's not perfect, they're not just going to get one off the shelf. They're going to make it.
Yeah.
So BlackHeart isn't to that level, because then the bike would cost 20 grand. But as far as I can control within the cost parameters that I have, you know, everything's important. I really take a lot of time paying attention to the details and thinking about bottom bracket standards and like, where does the little you know, hydraulic hose mount go, and do I use a clip or zip tie, or you know. So that's kind of I think the thing that has helped me, because I am so those things are so important, and I have developed a style of communication with them. I can get a product from an Asian factory that when I receive it, it's exactly what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely like, that's a learned thing, you know what I mean? It's obviously like, if it was super easy, and people would be like making a new bike company every day, right? So that's it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. I was wondering while we were chatting, I started thinking about, you got these like original 20 bikes, and you said, you know, that's pretty easy to sell. Like, I would imagine like word of mouth and whatnot, you know, and things of that nature. So how do you go about marketing your company once you get started to be like, all right, I want to sell more than 20, like that, you know?
And I would say the 20 were not easy to sell.
Well, then tell me that story.
Yeah. So they were easy to sell. They were hard from one perspective, and they were easy in another perspective. So at the time, BlackHeart Bike Company was a storage unit in Venice Beach, in like this seedy neighborhood.
Right.
And the way that I sold the bikes was that, you know, I didn't have money for advertising, nor do I think that, to be honest with you, like, did I really believe in the product enough to go and sell that, just like send one across the country and just be like, oh yeah, dude, like you're stoked, have a good time. Like I was still kind of proving the product to myself and the company to myself. And so I mentioned that I built up I did a run of 5 sizes the first time. And I built up 5 test bikes. So through the community, I mentioned Cody, who has been instrumental in the growth of BlackHeart. He is well embedded in the LA cycling community. So just kind of the people that I knew from riding in LA for 10 years, his community, I started doing test rides, and I would have people show up at the public storage unit, and I'd like punch in the code, gate would open, we'd go in, I'd roll up the door, And then I had a storage unit with all the parts and a little work stand, which they like kind of gave me the evil eye because I was basically working out of the storage unit. I had the 5 bikes there. So I'd give someone a bike, they'd go out on a demo ride and they'd come back, and about 7 out of 10 people bought a bike. And that was 1 to 2 per month. So that experience from that year of like, okay, I sold the 20 frames, which I was building up custom for people. 7 out of 10 people are buying them once they actually ride it and they kind of experience it. That's my proof of concept. So yes, from one perspective, it was easy because people loved the product and wanted to buy it. But from the other perspective it was hard. It took a year and it was high touch, a lot of conversations kind of going back and forth. And so second year, I rolled that into 60 frames. Took a year, kind of same process, but now I had a little bit of word of mouth in LA. Sold those 60 bikes like primarily in LA through word of mouth and through doing the demo program, and a few kind of online here or there frame sets that I'd ship out. And then year 3 was 100 frames. And that's the first time that I had people buying a bike that I hadn't talked to, right? Year 2 was you, Robert, would email me. We'd email back and forth 60 emails, speccing everything, getting a down payment, ordering the parts, building it up. Meanwhile, like that was one challenge of the pandemic. Getting parts was ridiculously hard. So I had people who would wait 9 to 12 months for the bike, which was also a great vote of confidence. And then year 3, this past year, 2022, that's when I really had people, buying bikes that I had never talked to. And that's like the most humbling experience you can ever have is someone plops down $6,000 for your bike, and you've never heard from them before. And that's kind of where we are. Like I it's all been word of mouth still. I hadn't really spent any money on advertising, a couple grand on like Instagram ads in 2022. And now 2023, this is where things are really scaling up. Starting to spend money on advertising, have the aluminum version, thinking about future models, and have a network of almost 10 dealers who are like Luft, the bike shop that I own. It's small, independent, kind of like cool community vibe. So yeah, it's in terms of like, do I have a master marketing plan? No, I haven't done any stunts. I didn't do like the celebrity endorsement. There weren't like really viral YouTube videos that caught on. It's really just been about having the foundation, a really beautiful product that I believe in. And it's all been word of mouth until this point. And this is the year where it's scaling beyond that.
How do you feel about like using YouTubers to promote your product? Do you feel like there's a lot of value there, or because some companies are like, they really just want to like get some professional of some sort to be on there, or like, do you feel like people on YouTube is like a really good asset, or?
I more look at it like the right content for the right channel. So, anybody in marketing world would hear like an omni-channel approach, right? So you've got YouTube, so you've got social, so YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever social platform is out there. Traditional media, so print media, whether you could now probably call that digital media, whether it's bicycling.com or you get the bicycling magazine. You've got PR where you're actually, interacting directly with journalists. So I haven't done any paid media in journals or anything like that. I've had a few reviews come out, one in Bicycling Magazine for the All-Road AL, which was aluminum, which was amazing. Their main quote was the perfect bike for a lot of people, which is exactly what it is, right?
You're like, that was awesome. I didn't have to pay him for that.
It really lovely. I went to Sea Otter last year, which was great. Essentially, you get to go and it's about the people and showing off the product, and it's like, a festival event, but you get a weekend where you can really get in front of every media outlet in the world.
Yeah.
And so having that opportunity was great. I got in a bunch of, top 10 bikes at Sea Otter, top 10 show stopping bikes at Sea Otter. So we're getting a bunch of those, which was good exposure. So yes, I think like the way that I look at it from a marketing perspective is, and this is like a combination that you can apply to any product in any industry. It's just a little bit of a variation on it.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it would be awareness, interest, trial, adoption. So let's think about a razor. First, you have to understand that the company exists or that they have a product. So awareness. You need to have interest so that, oh, okay, they have this product and that sounds kind of cool. Like I want to learn more. I wonder if that's right for me. Trial, you buy one and you actually use it and you're like, wow, this is the best shave I've ever had. And then adoption, you'll only buy that product. You'll tell all your friends to buy that product and you're just,
you're all in.
So for me, it is awareness, desire, and then I would say kind of a purchase. So you need to understand that or like awareness, desire, confidence, purchase. So you need to understand that BlackHeart exists. So talking to you, doing social, organic, and paid promotion. Then you need to actually want the bike. So that can be simply because you think it or it's beautiful, or you see someone cool riding it, or someone that you ride it, or you ride it yourself and you want one.
Yeah.
You need to have the confidence to purchase. So you can get people to be aware of your product. You can get people to want your product, but to get someone to actually put down $6,000 who lives in another part of the world, who you've never met and will never be able to actually see that bike in real life. They can't even go for a ride around a parking lot. Mm-hmm. That's where the bicycling mag reviews, the like customer reviews on my website, any sort of media, third-party validation, test rides, those things. Then you're like, oh, okay, that's actually how I bought a mountain bike a few years ago. The Evil Following came out. And it was, Bike Mag's #1 bike. So I bought that simply because they gave it their stamp of approval. And I read about it. That was right for me.
Yeah.
But to your question, using people for content, the first couple of years I didn't really do that. It was really just about supporting people and putting the bikes into their hands. And if they organically posted about it, awesome. I didn't have any sort of like, I'm giving you a bike and you have to post this amount of times and tag.
Because you had mentioned some ambassadors, so I wasn't sure exactly what you were thinking about when you said that. So I guess
the past few years, the ambassadors have really been like great example. This guy named Ron Holden in LA during pandemic and Black Lives Matter. He started a ride in LA called Ride for Black Lives, and it was kind of, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but it was about raising awareness for Black Lives Matter, giving a safe space for people to go on a ride in LA, which can be difficult because of the roads. And he was doing amazing work. So supported him by giving him a bike and, a business arrangement to support him. But there's no like, hey, you need to go and you need to post this. And at the end, it's not the BlackHeart Ride for Black Lives, right?
Yeah.
Now, moving forward, as I need to scale beyond being able to have those one-to-one conversations with everybody to sell bikes, like content becomes more important. So, within my time constraints, doing BlackHeart content, whether that's beauty shots of the bikes or build videos, like that'll all be coming in 2023. And then working with a few people who, already have a YouTube following and are going to organically bring the bike into their world, or they're already out riding and they're kind of, have a great TikTok presence and doing some fun stuff.
Yeah.
But it's really about, hey, here's a bike if you need one. And if you're riding and enjoying it and it's organically coming into your content already, great. But I don't do the, like, you need to go and, you need to go make a BlackHeart video for me. Why don't you make a Robert video? And if you're riding a BlackHeart, that's exactly kind of my approach.
Yeah, it makes sense. Right on, man. Oh man, I had a good one a minute ago. Forgot that. Every once in a while I write things down. But so if you were I don't know how, like you said, you started out with 20 and you went to 60, you went to 100. And if we were like I don't know, 5 years from now, like what would be like the dream number to you at that point? Is it like 5,000 frames? Is it like what do you, is there a certain spot where you're like, actually I don't want to be bigger than that?
When I'm there, I'm sure the answer will be different.
Yeah, I'm sure it always is. I mean, my
But
YouTube journey's been that way.
yeah, the one thing that I would say is like I don't want this to be like a garage band company, right?
Hmm.
I don't envision the rest of my life, you know, building one bike a month in my garage.
Hmm.
You know, I can't weld. I don't have that skill set, nor do I have the passion to learn, and nor would I really want to
Right.
build one-off custom frames. So for me, this company definitely I want it to scale.
Hmm.
It's not, and I want that because I like the satisfaction of it. I like the challenge of growing a company. You know, my experience in marketing was one thing, so I can apply that skill set, but I've never successfully grown a business. So that's a really great challenge for me that I love doing, that I'm passionate about. I love the idea of hiring people and giving people meaningful employment, not just a livable wage, but a wage in which they are super stoked to come to work every day, and there's
Yeah.
profit sharing within the company, and everybody benefits by the success. And like I'm still riding my round 3 prototype from 2019 as my personal bike.
Hmm.
It's like a metronome, right? It looks perfect, it rides perfect. There is like, if there's ever a scratch on the titanium, I take like a little maroon 3M Scotch-Brite pad and just buff it out. And so the fact that I so believe in the product and think it's the perfect bike for most people,
Hmm.
then whenever I send a bike out, I'm super stoked to sell a bike, but also so excited that someone is going to get on the bike and I get to hear back from them, and hopefully they're having a great experience. And if they're not, then I like hearing that too, because then I can make a better product for other people, and try and work out and figure out what's not working for them and how can I make it right or make it better.
It's super fulfilling, giving people happiness, and like if you have a spouse or kids, and like we just had the holidays, you give them a gift and they're excited about it, makes you feel good. And when you do that on like bigger and bigger scales, it's rewarding in an unexplainable way. I had an event a few years ago where I had, like, the first year it was like 15 people there, and then the next year it was like 100 people there. And it was like, I remember standing back at the end, like during the night, and just like looking at all these people, and it was like, this is crazy. Like, all these people are standing around here drinking beers, having a good time, chatting and laughing, and it's like I got them all here, like made this happen. Like, that's amazing. It like really felt like it was like a quite a feeling. And it's like, makes you want to do more. Okay, well, how can I make this like 500 people or whatever? And um I think everything that you said though is super super noble, and like, it's good intentions. And I feel like when you have that kind of intention, then it's really easy to be successful, because that like bleeds out in all the other ways. You know what I mean? Like, whether it's like, well, because you really care about your people, they're going to work harder, and because they work harder, the company's more successful, or like whatever it is. So that's really rad. I wanted to talk to you about your fork. You're not using somebody else's fork. You guys made your own, right?
Yeah.
How'd that
So
go?
so it's gone well. So essentially, the issue that I had with a lot of the forks that were available were that they, in order to have tire clearance for a 40 mil 700 by 440 or 650 by 50, they have like a pretty squared off shape to it, a lot of the gravel forks.
Mm-hmm.
And if from an aesthetic standpoint, if you put a small road tire in there, it's just swimming in a bunch of space, and it's like, oh, you're riding a gravel bike with road wheels.
Right. But basically what you're saying is it just doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good. And
Yeah.
so the shape of the BlackHeart fork is essentially the minimum amount to fit that gravel tire, so that when you have a road wheel on it, it really blends in. Like, you do a double take and be like, oh, like, is that a gravel bike? And
Yeah.
And so because I needed that shape, that meant that I needed a custom mold, which it is not it's not a deal killer. It's an investment.
Yeah.
But again, like the factories that I've identified in Taiwan and in China, that's their specialty. So I don't tell them like, oh no, like you guys are doing it all wrong. You got to put the carbon lamp this way and you got to use this resin. Like it's like, this is what I want, and they'll kind of come up with what they think will work. And so
was that something that you started with like right away, because then you were now searching for a titanium company and a carbon company, or did you happen to find one that did both?
I found one that was pretty close.
Okay.
And then through my titanium factory, they referred me to a carbon factory. So it's all relationships.
Okay.
It's all referrals.
Yeah,
just
so it works
right.
out.
So this guy knows this guy, and like, oh, get this. So like you kind of talk to different factories and you get a good feeling for whether they can do it or can't. And
so you knew when you were building the frame out the gate, like, I'm gonna be making my own fork too.
Yeah. And the other thing too was I had a fallback, right? So like I could use a open mold fork, or I could use a branded fork from another company. And it's not like it would be the end of the world. It would have the same dimensions. It would ride the same. It just wouldn't look as good. And so then that's the compromise of like, how important is that? I just was able to find a factory, do the mold, get the samples. And then one thing that I do, which I don't know if this is common or not common, but at least it's important to me, is that forks, frames, seat posts, anything that I personally make, even though it'll be certified at the factory there's two types of standards. There's I think it's CSPC or CPSC 1512, which is essentially, can it be sold in the US? Which is kind of like a very low bar. It's like, does it function essentially?
Yeah.
And then there's ISO 4210, I believe. That's the global standard. So like to sell in Europe or anywhere in the world, you have to pass the ISO standards. And that's when you see them, they put it in a vise and they wiggle it back and forth. And then they, drop stuff. They try and break it. Yeah. And essentially the initial products, and then samples from each batch, I'll take and I send them to a place in Southern California, and they test them to those standards. And what I found was it took 3 times of testing through the ISO standards to actually get the fork to be approved. Because the first one, a fork, there's 7 tests. Like one fork went through 3 tests and then it broke. And I was like, no. I want one fork to be able to go through all tests with no failure. And so then it's the next time it's like, oh, another fork came and it like got through 6 tests. And then on the 7th test, it had a crack here. It's like, no. So we each time we would strengthen it. And then the 3rd round it passed. But then when I was riding it out of the saddle, you could hear the rotor touching you could hear the disc touching the brake pad on the fork. So there's enough lateral flex in the fork that it was just kind of like just touching. And I was like, nope, send it back. Okay, make it stronger here. And so now I have a fork that passes CPSC. The same one fork can go through CPSC and ISO 4210 without any sort of failure. And carbon's not perfect. Like if you mistreat it, if you don't use torque wrenches, if you don't respect it, it can still fail. But at least now I know that I've done everything that I can do, and I can sleep well at night knowing that I have a product that can be compared to anything else on the market and, is just as good.
Right on. So, I guess we're talking about failures. What's the warranty look like from BlackHeart?
So anything titanium is lifetime, frame, seat post.
So that would mean like the weld broke or something like that, or
yeah, basically that's where titanium is going to fail. Like you're not going to have a tube just crack, but titanium's hard to weld. And it has to be done by hand. That's why titanium, not only the material is more expensive than aluminum, but it has to be welded by hand and in a environment free of oxygen. So they'll put argon gas inside the tube and they purge it with argon. But if you do all that and again, I'm not a welding expert, but even if you do all that, but you don't use the right current or the right temperature, the weld can be brittle and it can crack. We haven't had any failure with titanium welds cracking, but it's like, cool, lifetime warranty on anything. For lifetime warranty, original owner, frame, seat post, titanium. Anything carbon, the carbon fork, carbon seat post for the aluminum bike or the aluminum frame, that's 5 years against manufacturing defects. And that's simply, again, because of the properties, because aluminum has a fatigue life and carbon fiber, I don't know specifically about fatigue life and carbon fiber, but that's basically the same warranty that you're going to get from any big carbon fiber company.
Yeah. Makes sense. The other thing that was, I mean, that seems reasonable. So, I mean, if my fork failed after 5 years, it's like I put some miles on it. You know what I mean? So I would hope that everybody else did. But if it's been sitting in your garage for 5 years and then it failed, that's well, I guess that's your fault for not riding it.
No, I mean, like it doesn't fail because it's old.
Yeah.
It fails from either fatigue, meaning hard riding for years and years and years. It fails from a traumatic impact, whether that's a crash or hitting a huge jump with a gravel bike, which is just not designed for, just kind of inherently. Or it fails because someone, tightened down their stem without using a 5 Nm torque wrench, and they goosenecked the stem and cracked it. And so, we luckily haven't had any real issues with warranty claims or anything that from a manufacturing defect. But anybody who's had a problem from a crash or something, I'd look to kind of work with them and take care of them, whether it's a crash replacement or kind of figuring out what happened.
You have some kind of crash replacement program where for the guy that like leaves it on the roof and tries to park it in the garage.
I mean, I don't know about that one. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, like it's the way that I look at it is that's not going to make me make a better product, right? I can't make a better product that withstands impacts against your house. But someone comes in and they're like, hey, I hit a huge jump and I, or whatever happened. Okay, well, like you got to think about it. Like, is that something that somebody else is going to do? And is there something that I can do that will help either make the product better or safer? Then that's what we'll do for each round of production. For instance, like even silly things, not silly things, but like small things like rear derailleur hangers. If one breaks and you need one, we give a second one for free with a bike. But like if you're out riding, your rear derailleur hanger breaks, you have to order a new one from us because it's the design that we use. You can't just get it at a local bike shop. But the new titanium frames, and then eventually the next round of aluminum frames are using the SRAM UDH, the universal derailleur hanger, which is super common on mountain bikes now. And you can get one at any bike shop for $20. So even just kind of like learning like, customer rode and they were stuck, in the middle of nowhere because their derailleur hanger broke. Well, what can we do to make a better experience? And if it's a simple solution, then we'll do that.
Yeah. That's awesome. The other thing that I noticed was with the forks, I should have asked this a minute ago, was you have like, you can get it painted like a bunch of different like designs, or you can get it like just flat, like and I thought, wasn't there like, there's a custom option too? Like,
so the fork comes like a satin black. I wouldn't call it matte black because matte black is kind of like a chalky finish. It's like a satin black. Everybody loves satin black. Like, can't go wrong there. It looks super clean. It works well with carbon wheels. Like, it looks really nice and slick. But I always kind of thought it was a bad consumer experience when you go and you buy a really big ticket item that you've been lusting after, and then you roll up to a stop sign the first day and somebody right next to you has the exact same bike. Like, bikes are for a lot of us, bikes are an expression of us. We like really pay attention to I've got like rainbow anodized, bottle cage bolts, whatever. So I like the idea of personalizing it. I like the idea of allowing people to kind of make the bike their own. And so we have a couple templates. You can either just do like, single color, with or without logo. There's a couple stripe designs. Like I was originally painting them myself, learned how to paint, was kind of
right
like
on.
came up with a design that I liked, which was kind of like this single or double stripe on the fork. And then I did this kind of like wavy offset 6-color one that I really liked for my bike. And it was like shades of blue, but then a couple people did like sunset ones. Those ones really caught on. So those are the templates that we offer, kind of like standard color palette. But if you really want to do something custom, we can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then full custom. So there's a guy in LA named Mike, who's got a company called MPH Paint. And he is a paint master, can really do anything, super detailed, just sky's the limit. So I've had some people spend, $1,500 on a fork paint job and just go crazy custom, but that's what they want. So like, all good. Let's knock it out of the park for them. Yeah. And then, or just like, hey, I want it to be green and I want my bike just to be kind of special, or I want like this kind of stripe setup. Those ones are a lot more affordable. It starts at, I think, $300 for a single color, and it's $50 here or there for different stripes. It only takes, a couple of weeks to do it. So I think it's awesome. A lot of companies are doing custom paint programs, but I think ours is pretty simple and easy and affordable. And it's like, a third of the people, depending on the kind of season or whatever comes through the orders, will do custom forks. So
yeah. I mean, if you go to your website and kind of look through like the media there, I would imagine probably similar pictures up on Instagram, but there's like lots of designs up there that people have had, and they look sick. It definitely it gives the bike its own personality. That's a little bit more than just, what hub color you have or something like that. So
yeah,
you have a bunch of little like stuff written around on the bike too. Isn't there like so I remember seeing something like no haters or something like that, or
yeah, that was the original frame. So when I was starting in thinking about it in 2017, 2018, 2019, I mentioned the name BlackHeart. So like not having any love for all the marketing BS that's out there that tells you every year you've got to, buy the newest, greatest bike to save 3 seconds on the climb.
Okay.
And then no love for haters kind of popped into my head, and I did like a little design, and that was on the back of the seat tube. And so that's not on there anymore. It was just like a little fun thing. But after a while I was like, yeah, whatever. Like that's kind of lame. Let's just keep it clean. Let's keep the frames clean. So now it's for the tie, it's sandblasted logos. So they really blend in. Like I want the bike to kind of disappear while standing out, which doesn't make too much sense, but I don't want, BlackHeart, 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 BlackHeart everywhere. And just to be a walking billboard, I kind of want the overall aesthetic to kind of shine for itself.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's got, heart on the head tube, BlackHeart on the top tube. That's, pretty understated. On the back of the seat tube, it's got a heart up by, or the seat post up by where the clamp is. And then in the, seat stay bridge, there's an engraved heart. So it's all a little subtle branding. And on the aluminum frame, it's the exact same, except it's on the black, it's satin black paint with gloss logos, black gloss logos. So it's black on black. And then we have a chalk color that's kind of a nice white, off-white, that has black logos to it, 95% black.
Why no brushed aluminum?
I don't like the way it looks.
No.
Yeah,
it just doesn't grab you aesthetically.
It doesn't. And I don't
just
know why.
It's
kind of like, it's like asking someone like why they like a painting, or for me, just my personal aesthetic, I don't like raw aluminum. Raw titanium is incredibly beautiful. It has this kind of like deep, smooth richness to it. It reflects light in kind of different ways, whereas aluminum just feels like a little bit of a dud to me. So the aluminums will always be painted, and someone could go get it sandblasted if they wanted to. And
yeah, for sure. I was just curious. I was like, I wonder why. So
a couple of people have asked it.
Yeah,
but it's I've done well so far by building what I think is beautiful. versus like, I was talking to a guy not earlier, I mean, a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And he asked me, oh, why not like, why not bigger tire clearance, or why not this, why not that? And, it's all a compromise, right? Like if you make it more capable off-road, it's going to be less capable on-road. And what I said to him was, if I make a bike for everyone, I'll make a bike for no one. Yeah. So I kind of had to put a flag or a stick in the sand and say, this is the bike that I want. This is what I think is beautiful. If you like it too, I'll make it for you.
Yeah.
And, give them the ability to do the custom fork I think that's like a good compromise to let people make it their own.
So you can do the custom fork with the aluminum one as well?
Oh yeah. And so you can get, like with the chalk one, I do a color match fork option, or you can do whatever you want. And there's a bunch of examples on the website, so you can kind of go through. There's I did a gallery under the media section that has most of a good selection of the bikes that were sold in 2022, along with customers. So I like to kind of showcase those, but there's a ton of different options for inspiration.
So on the aluminum, is that the carbon fork as well, or is that fork made out of aluminum?
Same fork, same carbon fork as the tie. So it's literally it has a carbon seat post, because I didn't want to do an aluminum seat post. It's honestly, it's like the same price to manufacture my own carbon seat post as it is to buy a good third-party one.
Yeah, might as well, right?
So carbon seat post. That's the only thing that's that's the thing that's the same between both bikes, is the carbon fork. And then same headset. Even though I'm manufacturing in Asia, I kind of do my best to work with US companies where I can. So instead of getting, a $3 through axle from X factory in China, I buy Wolf Tooth through axles and headsets. And then like the wheels, that's why I really like working with Hunt versus just getting like a no-name open mold carbon wheel, kind of branding it my own. Kind of work with companies that are established, that share a similar kind of product philosophy. Like Hunt wheels they're not the best wheels in the world, but let's say
are they carbon or aluminum? What's on there?
They do carbon aluminum, right? So you can get, if you go and get X brand of wheel for $4,000, that's the best wheel that you can get in the world, and it's a 10 out of 10 quality. A Hunt wheel is a quarter of that price, and maybe it's a 8 or a 9 out of 10 depending on the wheel. And so it's a really great product at a fair price. And that's where I see BlackHeart. It's a really great product at a fair price.
Where's Hunt from?
So they're based in the UK, and then they have an office in Boulder, Colorado, and the lead kind of US guy is in LA. So we've become good friends, and I didn't know anybody there at first. I just reached out to him blindly, and I just said, "Hey, I love your product. I use it, and it really works well with my product. Can I start speccing them on my bikes?" And we've developed a relationship over time. We have them at our bike shop in LA Luft. We have them there for people to test and buy. So yeah, I mean, I can't think of a reason to spend more money, because they're so good.
So do they have the hubs already? They're with their own like proprietary hub, or are they using like some other brand's hub? Or
I don't know. I don't have any insight into their factories or their specs.
But I mean, your wheel comes from them with their hub then.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
So it's not like it's like, hey, this is an I9 hub on a Hunt wheel.
It's their own ecosystem, right? So that's their hub, their spokes, their actually, I don't know if they're using like Sapum spokes or something, but it's their rims. And then I just order them off the shelf, and basically I give the option to do kind of their perfect all-road aluminum wheel as the entry-level price. Then you can spec up to a carbon gravel wheel for $300 or a road carbon wheel for $400 or $500. And I mean, at the price point, like $800 to $1,000 for a really great carbon wheel, you can't beat it. They have a great aesthetic. They have a great warranty program. So and they have a ton of other wheels too. Like if a customer reaches out and they're like, I want this specific wheel, then I just kind of create a custom invoice for them and build it up for them.
Right on. So, I was on the site while we were talking a minute ago, and you also have an aluminum T. It's the alt bike. What's that?
Honestly, it's like a fun project. So I basically took the aluminum frame, put a flat bar on it, and built it up with essentially a mountain bike group set, or like a mullet group set. So kind of a road one bike crankset with a mullet rear. And then 650B wheels with, I think, a 2.1 in the rear and a 2.3 in the front, like 27.5 mountain bike wheel. And that started because when I moved to Truckee, there's all these flowy single tracks that on mountain bike are kind of boring. You know, like there's like overbiking. Everybody's kind of aware of that now, where you've got a 150, 160 mountain bike that could crush the Whistler downhill park. But most people are riding those on like kind of basic trails, and it can be fun, but it also can be kind of boring because it's just either you're overbiked or you kind of have to push it to have fun. And when you're pushing a bike like that, the risks are concussion, separated shoulder, broken collarbone, versus if you take a gravel bike, or essentially like a 1990s mountain bike, which I grew up riding, which was really fun back then. No suspension. You're going a third of the speed, but it's kind of sketchy, and you're skidding around and popping over stuff. And I just had a really good time on it. So I put a couple builds up there as options, and it's a riot, but I don't think it's not our number one seller. It's for like a very specific customer, and it's just like a fun exercise, you know?
Yeah, no, it looks super fun. It looks like a good time. So you said like a 2.1 tire is what you said?
It's 27.5, 2.1, because a 2.0 is a 50 mil. And that's what the frame's designed for. So 2.1, you get like a little bit of rub. And then 2.3 fits in the front, no problem. Actually, you know what? I put an NB gravel fork on it. So an NB gravel fork. So that fits the 2.3 easy.
That's why you got more clearance. Okay, I got
it. 2. And you're not putting a road wheel on it, so the aesthetic up front is fine.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
When you put a 2.1 in the rear and a 2.3 in the front, it like raises the front end a little bit, so it slackens it out a touch. I think I ride a size 60 frame, both in my tie bike and my alt, and I've got a 120 stem on it. So you've got to, in order for all the characteristics to work on a bike like this, you've got to put a really long stem on it to slow down the steering. And it works. I mean, I ride that more than I ride my drop bar bike.
Right on.
You know, it's fun. It's different.
Bikes are fun, man. Yeah, for sure. That's definitely it looks like a good time, that's for sure. It's it's so easy to come up with another design or another thing, and I think at where you're at right now, it's like stay focused on what's your core for right now, and that would probably work out best to not try to diverge into a bunch of different directions, but to have something where you're like, this feels right today, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's differing opinions, right? Like most people will say, do one thing and do it really well, stay focused. But I've already designed a road bike, I've designed a gravel bike. There are the design is done, they're in sampling just to try it and see how it is. And then doing an e-bike version of the all-road, that's in the works, and I'm not sure. I'm just currently exploring what the right partner is. So is it a mid-drive motor? Is it a hub motor? That's all kind of TBD. But
yeah,
the great thing is the foundation and the infrastructure is there for the company, and now it's more focusing on awareness and desire.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I guess you would probably be aluminum or carbon, or can you do that with titanium, to do an e-bike?
Yeah.
Okay.
Super easy. I mean, it's the good thing is, all the standards are there, right? So if Shimano puts out a new motor, all the factories are going to create a casing for that motor.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Because if you're I don't know, specialized, or if you own your own factory and you're developing your own hardware, you're developing your own software, you're putting in X millions of dollars in R&D, and that's going to filter through to the price of the bike. If you simply accept the fact that, oh, well, Shimano makes a motor and my factory makes a casing for that, and I can assemble, I can essentially, input that into my existing design and maybe make a few changes, like a down tube with a battery in the inside. And maybe that means that I need to make a few other changes aesthetically. That R&D process is a lot shorter and cheaper than what the big boys are doing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of our competitive advantages, is that we're small, we're nimble, and we kind of come up with a beautiful, unique design using pretty low intensive process from a sampling and an R&D perspective, which then bleeds into, that's why, the BlackHeart tie is $2,000 less than a similarly spec'd bike from X large company, because we're not sponsoring the World Tour team, and we're not spending the millions of dollars on CFD computer research, and we don't have a wind tunnel, right? Like it's about developing a bike that's beautiful and delivers an amazing experience at the compromise of, oh shoot, it weighs 100 grams heavier.
Yeah. I guess it would, I mean, for the most part, you're not feeling like you need to keep like engineering your frame to like your 13% stronger, bottom bracket or something like that. So I feel like you have like pretty much where it needs to be, and you're going to make some small tweaks along the way, and then maybe focus on the other options. So is what you're saying.
Right. Make changes where it's required to make a good product. So like I said before, with the fork, it's not a good product if you're out of the saddle going up a climb and you can hear your rotor tinging against your brake pads. That's like, that needs to be fixed, right? And that's, you go back and you do another round of sampling, and you come up with a better, but once you nail that, then you're kind of good to go. And then it's simple, then it's like refinements over time, because I don't have to worry about ensuring that X rider has a 3-second advantage up a climb.
I would imagine then, from like you said, for your alt bike, you use the aluminum frame to kind of build that out. I would imagine that it would be like a pretty like natural progression to actually like build something that's more like gravel centric than road centric, right?
So that's the question, right? So resources are limited when you're a small company. And
I mean, this could be 10 years from now or 5 years from now or whatever.
Or next year. Like,
right.
It literally depends on how things go. For like month to month, kind of plans change based on kind of what the landscape looks like. But what's important to me is continuing, like for me, doing the R&D is a fun process. The design, the like getting a sample and testing it, that's super fun. And it's a pretty low intensive thing. And so creating whatever my version of a road bike is going to be, getting that sample and dialing it in so that I can push go with the factory when I want to, is one thing that I'm doing. And then like the same thing with a gravel specific bike, that like my version, my design aesthetic and philosophy of what a BlackHeart gravel bike would be, having that ready to go when I'm ready. And then also the e-bike, like, cool, here's the favorite motor that I think is perfect for it. Talk to my factory, make sure we have the casing, talk to a battery partner, make sure everything is just ready to go. So like that's always constantly happening, always thinking about the future. And then to your question earlier, like what does BlackHeart become and how quickly does it scale? That's literally an effect of revenue in and expenses out. So the faster we are growing, the more faster we're selling bikes, the bigger we can scale to bring these products to market.
Yeah. It's definitely, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to sell stuff to buy, to like make more, right?
Yep. And that's what, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was just gonna say, like, that's one thing that I wasn't comfortable with starting BlackHeart. That's one of the reasons why I self-funded it through January 1st, 2020, was because, and it's not right or wrong. There are a ton of companies, like I know someone who raised like $5 million for a vibrating chair that puts you in a trance state, right? So like you can raise a ton of money on a dream, and those companies can go on to have huge success and they'll scale faster. At the time, I just didn't believe. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it before I went and took on debt, or I asked, or I took on investors, right? So that's kind of what I think. Now that kind of proof of concept and people are loving the bikes and there's a kind of a vision for how to scale the business, now it's a different conversation of who are the right partners from an investment standpoint, what's the right debt strategy, and how quickly do we scale. That's kind of what we're working through right now.
I think it's interesting to hear you like talk about how you wanted to self-fund and what your reasons were. I mean, I feel like it is more of a, not more of a, that's the wrong way to say it, but it's like something that you actually wanted to do for yourself more than
It was.
than to make a company successful. It was like something like a soul searching thing for you, you know?
Yeah, and there's more on the line, right?
Yeah.
More on the line.
I think. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, if you work for 16 years and put your savings into starting a company and you end up with zero, that is you will take a different approach into your decisions of how to scale versus if you partner with someone and someone puts 250 grand in your bank account, you're going to spend that money very differently. And even my own money, like I've got a garage full of sweatshirts because I was like, oh man, people are going to like, all my friends are going to buy sweatshirts, but maybe I'll make more money selling sweatshirts. So I bought a bunch of sweatshirts and it's like, all good. I still have them and we'll sell them, but you make it. It was this entire exercise has been trial and error. Like it's I didn't have an advisor in the bike industry who was giving me tips along the way. It was really just about thinking through what I want, working with Cody as a sounding board, getting his feedback, thinking about the LA market, what sort of bike is great for there, and then trusting that each time you make a decision, you'll figure out pretty quickly whether it's a good decision or a bad decision. And then the key is if you make a bad decision, not feeling the failure and like running your head against a wall and just saying like, no, like it's not the wrong decision. We just got to try harder. No, like abandon that. It's not a failure. It's a learning, and then kind of move in a different direction and kind of move that way. That's where I think when we're talking about learnings, that's one of the biggest learnings is you have to be okay with one, being like failing a lot, and two, trusting the process. As long as you are continuing to do things, you have to trust in the process that 12, 6, 12, or 1, 6, 12, 24 months down the road, you'll have many different decisions to make at that point. You just kind of have to focus on what's important now and doing the best you can.
Yeah. I've definitely, not sweatshirts particularly, but I've went out and bought some stuff that I thought was going to do well. And I can relate with you. It's like, oh, well, then I end up giving that stuff away. But then it's like later I looked at it, it's like, well, I learned a lot of like how I manufactured that stuff. And then to me, it's like, it still ended up being a win because it was like, okay, well, it cost me that much, but now I like got all these people, wearing that hat or whatever it is, and it's like, maybe it wasn't that bad after all,
Yeah. And then, you take those learnings. So our bike shop in LA, we're looking at doing, whether it's t-shirts or like our own product. I can look at that experience and say, okay, well, one thing that we don't need to do is this. How can we be smarter? How can we avoid the mistakes that I made? So kind of transferring that knowledge to my business partners.
I think a brand like, counterculture is not the right word, but because you had said that as well, like but the way that you want your brand to be, like kind of like not the corporate 13 grams, or whatever that we were talking about at the beginning. I think with a brand like that, like having some kind of merch that goes along with it, I think it actually does, like, it makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, you want to represent your BlackHeart, t-shirt whenever you're maybe not on the bike or something like that. So I think having some stuff like that, I feel like it goes hand in hand, but
Yeah.
like, obviously you don't want to like just like, okay, I'm gonna dump $50,000 in freaking, soft goods.
Yeah, I kind of look at like the BlackHeart accessory is the bike shop that we started. So
Mhm.
I was in a storage unit, doing test rides out of there, and it's like, okay, I need some sort of like physical location. And I didn't want to get a commercial garage somewhere in LA that was kind of in the middle of nowhere. And so with my now fiance Kristen and Cody, the three of us kind of got together and we started thinking, what is needed in LA from a bike shop perspective. If
Mhm.
if Blackheart needs a home to do the demo program and to showcase the bikes, we can do that, but is there something else? And so we started thinking through, like any sort of market analysis, what's the gap? And there wasn't really a spot in LA on the west side that was a kind of a neutral territory from a brand perspective, that offered people a spot to come and be, first day on a bike to a pro, come and hang out and feel welcome. We're not even to ride a bike and walk in the shop and find something for them, whether it's, streetwear or I don't know, a candle or something. So
Yeah.
we kind of created this really beautiful, welcoming, small bike shop on the west side. And that's kind of where I put anytime that I would sit there designing a cool t-shirt, it's really spent towards trying to build Luft and,
Mhm.
you know, do events, put on events for people. We'll do rides and like 100, 200 people will show up, and that stuff takes time. So,
Yeah.
that's,
Do you think
we
there will be
have
a Luft 2.0 in Truckee?
not, I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
Luft is special. Lyft is special, and I'm hesitant just to like go and McDonald's it.
Mhm.
If it goes beyond LA, I think it would be amazing.
Mhm.
But Chris has a full-time job. Cody's he's a partner at Luft, but he's also the store manager, and so we're all kind of at our. And I'm full-time with BlackHeart, obviously. So Luft is almost like a passion project for Chris and I. And then Cody, it's really his baby. And he's if there's a face to Luft, it's Cody.
Mhm.
So yeah, if that scales, then it'll be amazing. But it'll require a little bit more time and investment, I think, beyond the three of us.
So what's the buying experience for somebody right now? Just go to the website and fill out some form, or just put in your credit card and it shows up in a box, or how's it work?
So I try and make it as clear as possible instead of, oh, we do custom builds, here's a deposit, and, let us know what you're thinking. So both the aluminum and the titanium have 6 or 7 build options. A lot of that stuff, like I keep, a small amount of all the group sets in stock. So pretty much if someone wants a frame set, it ships out in a couple days. If someone wants a full build, it usually takes about 2 weeks. If I need to get like a cassette or something that's not in stock, but we're still building them on order. You can go on, if you see exactly what you want, click buy, and then I'll follow up with an email. If you don't see what you want, we can totally do a custom build. And so you can either DM the Instagram, you can email the hello@BlackHeart, or the DM feature on the website that just comes to me. So I'll be responding. And yeah, just kind of go back and forth and figure out what you want. And I'll give you an estimated time on when it'll be done. But like I said, it's a world of difference going from like a 9 to 12 month turnaround because of the part supply. Now the whole industry is oversupplied.
Mhm.
So that is a huge change of being able to get people a bike within 30 days.
Oh wow, okay.
But yeah, it's
So you ship anywhere in the US, or are you international, or what's the?
So primarily people are buying bikes in the US and then in Canada. So frame sets, full builds, build in 2 wheel sets, whatever it is, ship US, Canada, and Mexico. And then Europe and other countries, I typically just send frame sets. Not necessarily because it's cost prohibitive, but boxes get beat up. So a 30-pound frame or bike in a box being sent to wherever, it's pretty high risk that it's going to get kind of sat on or put in a container upside down. So I prefer just to ship frame sets overseas, and then that will change as we scale and probably get like a European distributor to ship directly out of Europe. But yeah, for now, it's primarily US and Canada, and then super enthusiastic people, like, of course, I'll figure it out. So I've sent bikes to the Philippines, United Arab Emirates, UK, France. We'll get it done if someone is really excited on it.
And then as far as like if somebody wanted to actually ride one or sit on one, or like, I'm not sure if I'm a 58 or I'm a 56, like how would they go about that? Just kind of like email with you, or is there?
Yeah, so the sizing question, like, that happens a lot, and I don't want to build someone a 54 and send it to them and realize they need a 56. So I consult with them on the size, get kind of stand over, height, look at their current bike and get some measurements off of that if there's a question. And we'll dial in your frame set or frame size. And then once the bike gets shipped to you, I always encourage people to get a fit. It makes a huge difference, both from how the bike handles and feels, but also just your long-term health. So that's an easy thing. That kind of happens with every bike. I'm happy to go back and forth on that. If someone wants to test ride it, so we've got a demo program in LA. If you're ever visiting, you can come check out a bike, or if you live in the area, there's a shop in New Hampshire called Ski the Whites. My buddy Andrew, who I went to high school with, he owns Ski the Whites, and they have some bikes to demo. And then the other dealers that I have, they typically have a good amount of, good size run in stock, 54, 56, 58. So there's Marin Service Course in San Francisco, just north of, Road Crew in the Midwest.
So I would imagine people could find that on their
BC
website.
and Miami. I mean, yeah, it's not an extensive network, right? Odds are you're not going to.
But I mean, on your website, they could go in and just say, like, show me the dealers, and it's on there.
Oh yeah. There's a dealers tab. So like, if you happen to be by a dealer, go by and check them out. And like, I'd prefer for you to buy through them, because I own a local bike shop, so I know what it takes to run one, and I'd love to support their sales. But if you're not close, then hit me up, and happy to answer any questions and dial in size and kind of give you my experience. The good thing too is I just added the review feature on the website. So there's a ton of people who've bought bikes, they put up a picture of it, and they kind of give their experience. So you can glean a lot from that. And then I'm working on some more content for 2023, just kind of showing, how it rides and who it would be right for.
Right on. Earlier in the show, you were saying that like part of the reason you started is you were tired of working for somebody else. You wanted to work for yourself. And I've definitely related with that a lot of times in my life. So now you're like 3 years in. Do you think that you've met like the goals that quit your job Zach had, like, at least in that aspect, or are you happy?
Yes, there's someone asked me a similar question. I think it was along the lines of like, oh, when will you know that you've been successful, or when will you feel like you've made it? And I said, I don't think you ever get to the top of the mountain. The view just gets better. And so the fact that the bikes are selling, the fact that the revenue is there to afford to, buy new frames, and it's a successful business model where I can sell even at like a good price point, I can grow the business, and we're close to hiring more people. That for me, that's like a huge success. The fact that it's, a perpetual motion machine at this point. Now that doesn't mean it'll always be there, right? Like, we could talk in, I don't know, things could go different, but I'm trusting in the process and things are good now. So I'm very happy with the decision. I don't think it's for everyone. Like I was talking to my brother in 2020, we were on a backcountry trip in Golden, BC.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said, like, along the lines of like, I'm proud of you, which was amazing to hear from your older brother. But he said, like, I couldn't do that. And I was like, yeah, you could. Like, it's easy. You just quit your job and then you take your savings and you like start a company and then you like just work on a day. And he was like, no. Like, I couldn't do that. I literally, like, my risk tolerance isn't there.
Yeah.
And so it's not for everyone. But and like you asked before if I have kids, right? Like at the time I didn't have kids. I had a new girlfriend and a dog. I was fortunate in that way that if I had a family, there's no way I would have done it. Like,
who knows? Maybe,
maybe, yeah. But, I was I think it's everyone's decision, but it's definitely a certain type of person who, I think growing up, like the thing that I equated to is whenever I was skiing or biking or like rollerblading or something, whatever fad of the moment, I would see the jump and I would be like, oh, cool. So like the landing's there. I just have to clear that river or gully. So no problem. Like I'll just hit the jump and clear and land it. Like I would just see myself naturally do that. And I didn't have the fear of like, oh shit, what if I don't hit the landing and I fall in the gully?
Yeah.
It wasn't a question. It didn't enter in my thought process. Right.
Right.
And of course I would like come up short and land in the gully and like break a bone. And my parents would get mad at me. Like, what were you thinking?
Right. You're like, no, I was thinking I was going to land it. That's what I was thinking.
Land it, right? And so like, I don't do that anymore. I've gotten smarter over the years and I don't hit those jumps. But from a business perspective, it was a calculation of like, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is 3 years go by. I like get to like work carpentry and build a bunch of cool stuff, which will be fun. I get to work outside, kind of be by myself. And I get to like experiment with this thing. And if that costs me the like money that I've earned, well, I'm not taking it with me and I'll still be young enough to get a corporate job that pays me well again. And I can like, be frugal for a couple of years and I could probably make back the amount that I invested simply by like being more frugal and end up exactly where I was. So it was actually like some people would see it as a very high risk. And for me, the risk was pretty much zero.
Yeah. And the funny thing about money is you can always come up with more later,
That's the theory, at least.
I'll tell you, I mean, we're right about 2 hours here and I'll make it quick, but like long story short, went through a shitty divorce and basically like started over from zero. Like just so it's like when the house market took a dump, had to foreclose the house, like literally standing in Target, like 30 years old or whatever it was. And I'm buying like a plunger and a pillow because I'm like moving into my apartment, and I'm like standing there and I'm looking at this kid that's like 18 years old getting ready to go to college with like all the same shit in their hands. Right. And I'm just thinking like, holy crap, like this is happening, and one of the most valuable things that happened through that experience was realizing how resilient that I was. And like, actually like, dude, like a year and a half later, I was buying another house and it was like, dude, that took away a lot of fear from me, like fiscal fear, where a lot of people are like what you were saying, like your brother is like, I can't do that. Like that risk tolerance is too high. And I think that process for me was one of those things where it's like, I've already shown myself, like I can lose everything and I can get right back, so screw it, man. I don't even care. Like I'm going to chase my dreams. I only have so much time here.
It's literally I think the most important lesson to learn as a kid. And that's like, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of what's wrong with youth today. Cause I don't think that there is anything wrong with youth today, but protecting your kid from not getting the ribbon or from losing or failing. Like we all learn that, and that's an important lesson. And so kind of understanding, is in 2018, I moved out of my apartment. I had a motorcycle. I had this decision-making process, essentially like, what do I want more? Do I want my motorcycle or do I want a bike company? Do I want, the old classic car, or do I want a bike company? I kind of went through my life.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to stay in LA or do I want a bike company? And I bought a Sprinter van, converted it for 2 months after I left my job, got rid of my apartment, sold basically everything that wouldn't fit into a small storage unit or the van, got in the van. And at that point I had the second prototype, and I drove throughout I'd never been through the Pacific Northwest, went up through the Pacific Northwest, drove all around, went through Montana, down through South Dakota, just me and my dog, drove all the way to the East Coast, went up to Toronto where my fiance is from, drove across the Canadian #1 to the West Coast, went by Whistler, went by Squamish, came down the Oregon coast. I don't remember how many, I think maybe it was 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And, in one aspect, I'm like, cool, I'm 38 years old living in a van down by the river. And another aspect, it's like, okay, well, I'm 38 years old and I know that I can live in a van down by the river.
Yeah.
So if this is as bad as it's going to get, and it was like the trip of a lifetime,
right,
then, I kind of started at a good, a good spot to go up from.
Yeah, that trip of a lifetime is probably more valuable than all the other things,
It was incredible.
Right. I believe it. I have some friends that had sold their house and basically everything that they have, and they bought a trailer instead of a van, and they drove that thing around for like a year and just like lived off of everything that they sold. And I mean, it wasn't like they were like, balling, but on the other hand, they weren't like not going out to eat, and you know what I mean? Like, but they had a year, and it's like the experiences and the stories that they have from that year is just, it's like, man, that's priceless. And so many people I've seen, like in my working career, like guys that are like 65 or 70 years old and just like truck their whole life on getting to like retirement, and then they retire, and unfortunately something has happened to them and they pass away, and then you're like, dude, that fucking sucks, man. Like you didn't, you made it all the way to the payoff and you didn't get to enjoy that. And I think that's one of those kind of things where it's like, I like to like surround myself by people that are willing to experience life right now as much as they can and still be responsible. You know what I mean? I'm not telling everybody like just blow everything off.
Same experience. When I was 16, my dad died and he was 64. And he had a great life. But he's like, one of the most interesting men in the world, in my opinion. But yeah, like wait till I'm 64 and I've got a trick hip and I retire, and like, so I definitely appreciate, I appreciate hard work. I appreciate loyalty. And I think there, unfortunately, and it's not the workers' fault. I think it's companies' faults as well for not creating an environment where employees feel valued. But they'll work at a company for 1 to 3 years and then just kind of leapfrog around. One of the benefits of that is that I think people are more okay with not the idea of like, oh, I've got to work here for 30 years, then I can retire and have fun. It's like, well, I've had 4 jobs in the last 5 years with different companies. I'm going to take a year off and go do something. I think it's great. Yeah. And I think you'll probably find what was missing in those past 5 years, which led you to jump ship 5 times or 4 times.
Yeah.
To maybe find what you want to do and be kind of more content and happy in life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm sorry for your loss at a young age. That's hard to deal with.
Thanks.
Outside of that though, sounds like he did a pretty good job getting you to where you were by the time he moved on. So.
Oh yeah. Until 16, things were good. After 16, things didn't go so good, but didn't go so well, I should say. But,
well, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me. I usually ask people, and maybe real quick, what YouTube channels do you like to watch, whether it has anything to do with biking or not?
oh, you don't want to hear my YouTube videos. I would say one of my favorites is called Project Farm.
Uh-huh.
It's a guy, I don't know where he lives. I'm going to guess Midwest just because he gives me a Midwestern feel, but he essentially comes up with creative ways to test things. It's like, what's the best super glue? So he'll come up with all these mechanisms and I'll test them all. Or like, what's the best, like, does seafoam work for removing carbon from the inside of an engine? What's the best electric chainsaw? So
Yeah.
I would say Project Farm is high up on my list.
Oh, that sounds fun. It sounds fun. It sounds like a fun one. Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. Actually, I wanted to send him a bike and have him do a spoof video of like reviewing a BlackHeart the way that he does the his products. And then typically I like Seth Meyers, Late Night with Seth Meyers. That's a daily event for sure.
Sweet. Right on, dude. Well, like I said, it's always fun to hear. Sometimes you get some real jewels, and sometimes, it's like, oh, well, it's the typical bike ones. And sometimes it's hard for people to come up with it on the spot, but it's always fun to hear. So I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
Well, outside of that, really appreciate you sitting down for the last 2 hours and talking BlackHeart with me. It was really fun and informational, and I felt like I learned a lot, not only about BlackHeart, but about like how bikes are manufactured or how to start a business and things that you've learned along the way. So your perspective it feels valuable to me. So I'm sure that there's plenty of other people out there going to feel that same way. So thank you. Those of you guys that are listening, I told you that I would look on Apple Podcasts, and I did swing over there, and the last review is from January 16th, which is not quite last week. So somebody's slacking out there. There was like 1,500 people that listened to last week's podcast. So I'm expecting one of those 1,500 people, or maybe one of the 1,500 people that's listened to this one, to swing by Apple Podcasts and write me a 5-star review. This guy starts out with this headline: he's one of us, plus he's entertaining. So that's the pyro fighter. Give me 5 stars over there. So I feel like one of you that is listening to this message right now can go over there and do that. If you don't want to do that and you just want to hang out and you just want to see some stuff for free, go over to Instagram, give me a follow over there at BikerB1. And while you're there, you can type in BlackHeart Bikes and check out his Instagram. They also have a YouTube channel. So those of you guys that are watching on YouTube, you can hit that up. But outside of all of that, once again, like I said at the very beginning, I want to thank everybody on Patreon. You guys are seriously the people that make it happen for me. So I appreciate the support. If you want to be one of those, go to Patreon. I'm pretty sure you can figure out how to punch buttons and read stuff. And you've heard me talk about it about a billion times. So thank you, though, for everybody that's over there. Anybody that wants to just get something for free and just move on, just remember, it only takes a bike to be a biker. Get out and be one.